Parashas Chukas, the section that we're going to be looking at, is right at the end of Chamishi. So that's Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Tes. And to put it into context, we'll also look a little bit at Pasuk Ches. So that's chapter 21, Pasuk 8, but we're primarily going to focus on Pasuk 9. This is the story where the Jewish people complained. Not that there's anything so surprising about that. We see that happen quite a number of times during the course of their sojourn in the desert. And then Hashem sends these fiery, that's the expression that's used, these fiery snakes, nechashim has-serafim, these fiery snakes, basically, that attack the people. And there's this, as you can well imagine, terrible panic in the community and people who were being killed. So what we're going to see is that Hashem tells Moshe. So let's look at Pasuk Chof, because Pasuk Ches, that will give us the context. So we'll start with Pasuk Ches, then we'll look at Pasuk Tes, and we'll look at the Rashi. So Pasuk Ches goes like this: Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, Asei lecha saraf, make for yourself a viper, v'sim oisoi al nes, and place it on a pole. V'haya kol anoshuch, any person who is bitten, v'ra'ah oisoi v'chai, they will see it, they will see that snake on the pole, and they will live. Continuing in the next pasuk, the one that we're going to focus on, pasuk Tes, Vayas Moshe nechash nechoshes. So Moshe made a copper snake, vayisimehu al hanes, and he placed it exactly as Hashem had said, al hanes, on a pole. Vaya, and then what happened was, im noshach hanochosh esish, if a snake would bite a person, v'hibit el nechash hanochoshes v'choy, he would then look at the copper snake and he would survive. Okay, so clearly on the face of it, Moshe did what Hashem said. Hashem said, make a snake on a pole. He made a snake on a pole. Hashem said that anybody who looks at the snake would be saved. People looked at the snake and they were saved. Let's see what Rashi has to say. Rashi on Tes. It's not a very long Rashi. Nechash nechoshes. It says that Moshe made a copper snake. Says Rashi, Loi nemar loi la asoisa shel nechoshes. Moshe was not instructed, if you look at the pasuk prior to this, he was not instructed to make this snake out of copper. All Hashem said was make a snake and put it on a pole. Moshe innovated that it should be out of copper. So what prompted Moshe? This is what's bothering Rashi, right? What's bothering Rashi? If Hashem did not tell Moshe to make it out of copper, what prompted Moshe to make it out of copper? Says Rashi, Moshe said the following. He made a logical deduction. HaKadosh Baruch Hu koiroi nachash. Hashem calls the snake nachash. Therefore, vani esenu shel nechoshes. Therefore, I will make the snake that I put onto a pole out of copper. Why? Lashon noifel al lashon. Okay? So, what's the reason for it? Lashon noifel al lashon. Word association. The word nachash and the word nechoshes are very closely associated both in spelling and in pronunciation. So I hear and I see a connection between the word nachash, which is snake, and nechoshes, which is copper. So Moshe worked out from that the implication is he should make the snake out of copper. So again, what's bothering Rashi? What's bothering Rashi is Hashem told Moshe, make a snake. And Moshe apparently came up with the idea of making a copper snake of his own accord. So how did he know that he had authority to make it out of copper? Says Rashi, because he made a word association. Now there's an incredibly obvious question in this Rashi. Incredibly, glaringly obvious question. However, before we address the glaringly obvious question, let's first look at two other things about this Rashi that seem to be unusual. Number one, we know that whenever we learn Rashi, Rashi's job is to identify anything in the pshat of the pasuk, in the simple understanding of the pasuk, that does not appear to be so simple. And then Rashi will explain it. But it's not common for Rashi to actually spell out the question. Rashi assumes that you have a question, and then he goes directly into his commentary. That's right across the board throughout all the Rashis that we've learned, pretty much. Look over here what he says. Loi nemar loi la soy soy shel nechoshes. Rashi's raising the question. He's spelling out the question for us. That's most unusual. What should have happened is Rashi should have said nechash nechoshes, that the words in the pasuk are to make, or that he made a copper snake. He should have gone straight into Amar Moshe. That's how it should have gone. Amar Moshe. That would have been classic Rashi style. Amar Moshe. Moshe said, let me define or defend why it is that I'm making it out of copper, because Hashem used the word nachash. So that's question one. Why is it that Rashi feels the need to introduce the question to us first? In other words, the difficulty, the problem with the pshat in this pasuk, as if we wouldn't work it out on our own. And that basically leads us into the second question, which is a derivative of the first question. Generally speaking, Rashi always says things in the shortest way. Rashi is succinct. That's one of the things that we know about Rashi, is that his commentary is succinct. So there, we also have the question, surely from the fact that Hashem said, Asay lecha saraf, make the snake. So Rashi, from that, knows that we know that Hashem told him to make a snake. So why does he have to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu koirei nachash, that Hashem told him? Why doesn't he just say that it is called nachash, a snake is called nachash, right? And I'm making it out of copper. But the glaring question here is, Rashi says that Moshe's motivation for a copper snake was, what does he say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu koirei nachash. That Hashem called it nachash. But he didn't. He didn't call it nachash. Let's go back. What does he say? He says, Asay lecha saraf. Saraf, he says. So the whole basis of Rashi's commentary seems to be fictional. Why? What prompted Moshe, according to Rashi, what prompted Moshe to make it out of copper? Because Hashem said nachash. Okay, that would be great, assuming that Hashem had said nachash. But he didn't. He said saraf. So how could Rashi, who apparently is worried why it is that Moshe chose to make it out of copper, how could he bring as his answer for that a quotation that's actually not the right quotation? So the whole basis of the whole commentary seems to be flawed. Okay? That's our major question. I mean, the others are also significant questions, but that's our major question in this section. There's one other thing that we have to wonder about. There are two occasions that it says whoever was bitten by the snake, if they would look at the snake on the pole, they would be saved. The first occasion is where Hashem tells Moshe, make a snake, put it on a pole, and, future tense, whoever will look at the snake will be saved. That's in the previous pasuk Ches. And the second time that we talk about it is here in this pasuk, at the end of this pasuk, where it says, whoever looked at the snake was healed. So the first is a prediction, a promise from Hashem, and the second is Sipur Dvarim. It's telling us what actually happened. Rashi comments on that idea of looking at the snake, and he says two things. We're going to focus on the second one. He says, what do you think? The snake healed people? You think the snake had that kind of power? Rather, what it means is whoever would look up at the snake, it was a reminder to look up at Hashem, and if you focused on that, that's what healed you. So why does Rashi say all of that information dafka in pasuk Ches, where Hashem promises what will happen? Why does he not rather say it here in pasuk Tes, when it tells us what actually happened, and after he had clarified why it had to be nechoshes? In other words, it would have logically seemed to have flowed better to tell us the nature of the snake, the design of the snake, the motivation of how he made the snake out of copper, and then flowing from that, say to us, and that snake would create consciousness of Hashem by looking upwards, and therefore the people were saved. So that's the other thing that we need to understand. Let's flip back to where the story began. In Pasuk Vav, Pasuk 6. Pasuk Vav says like this. This will help us to build an answer. Pasuk Vav says, Vayishalach Hashem ba'am, Hashem sent in or amongst the people, Eis hanechashim ha-serafim, the snakes that burnt. And they started to bite the people, Vayamas amrav mi Yisrael, and many people died. Okay, but the point over here is it says that they were nechashim ha-serafim. Look at Rashi for a second, the Rashi on that pasuk. Rashi says, nechashim ha-serafim, what does it mean? Shesorfim es ha'adam be'eres shinehem. That they burnt people with the venom of their fangs. So I'd like to ask you a question. In that pasuk, what are the snakes called in that pasuk? Are they called nachash or are they called saraf? It's in plural. So are they called nechashim or are they called serafim? What are they called in that pasuk? They're called, you say both, right? Are they called both? Exactly. Nechashim is a noun and serafim is an adjective. So what are they called? What is the species identified as in that pasuk when we're told the story that these snakes come to attack them? The species is identified as nechashim. Serafim is only an adjective to tell us those snakes poisoned the people with a venom that was hot. But that's not the name of the snake. The name of the snake, the genus of the snake is Nachash. Now, maybe there are other snakes that are a different species called Saraf. That's quite possible, but not these. So these are the species called Nachash that have the characteristic of Saraf, the characteristic of burning. Okay? So therefore, we can understand that in the context of this entire conversation, the name of the snakes is Nachash. And the adjective to describe how they attacked is Saraf. But that will not in any way remove their name or shift their name and tell us they are no longer called Nachash. No, these snakes are called Nachash. So now Hashem says to Moshe, there is this plague and the snakes are attacking people and people are dying and you got to do something about it. What should you do? Asay lecha saraf. Now, in the context of what we've just learned, that the species of snake that attacked them was the Nachash species, and saraf was only an adjective that described the kind of venom that they would inject into their victims. So when Hashem says, Asay lecha saraf, is Hashem telling Moshe, make a snake that is of a different species to the one that is attacking? No, that wouldn't be logical. It would make absolutely no sense. So what is the Torah telling us? Asay lecha, make for yourself a snake to represent the saraf, the venom. In other words, to protect, to neutralize the venom of these snakes. But the word saraf over there is not a description of what kind of snake. The kind of snake is a nachash snake. Hashem called it a nachash snake. Well, one second, but Hashem didn't call it. In spite of the fact that the Torah tells us that the species was nachash snakes, still when Hashem gave the instruction, he didn't say the word nachash, right? Look at the words, it just says saraf. Hang on a second. If you look through the entire Torah from top to bottom, specifically, if you look through all of the interactions between Hashem and Moshe, you'll notice that there's a theme. And the theme is that when Hashem speaks to Moshe, very often the information that the Torah records Hashem telling Moshe is a lot less than the information that the Torah records Moshe telling the people. And there are many examples of this, some overt and some implied. Some of them are overt, where you see Hashem tells Moshe, go tell the Jewish people X and Y, and then Moshe goes and he gives them a whole lot of details. And some are implied, like, for example, the mitzvah of tefillin, where the Torah doesn't even tell us what Moshe told the people to do, but we know what he told them to do, because that's how we put on tefillin today. So in other words, it's completely consistent with the Torah that you will find words in the instruction from Hashem to Moshe that are succinct, summarized, whereas those same words, when they come from Moshe to the people, are developed. We obviously don't for 1 second imagine that Moshe makes up his own stuff. Whatever Moshe tells the Jewish people, that's what Hashem told him. It's just the style and nature of the Torah to sometimes keep the wording of the instruction from Hashem to Moshe to the absolute bare bones, and wait until the story tells us how Moshe put it into practice to give us the details. Like I say, you can see that across Torah. So we'll see the same principle over here. Hashem says, Asei lecha soraf. Make for yourself on a pole, make a soraf, which we thought was the genus of the snake. We thought that was a noun. But because of the context where we have already seen that actually the word soraf in this story is used as an adjective, we now appreciate that there's more that Hashem told Moshe to do that is not recorded in the speech from Hashem to Moshe. It is only recorded in the application when Moshe actually made the snake. So what did Hashem say to Moshe? Asei lecha nachash soraf. Make a snake that is symbolic of these snakes that are attacking with their heated venom. But the Torah doesn't record that kind of detail because we're going to see it play out in Moshe's choice of making a copper snake. And that's where we'll recognize, so when Hashem said it to him, he actually said nachash saraf. And that's what Rashi is telling us, that what Moshe wanted to do was lashon noifel al lashon, word association, because Hashem uses the term nachash not only in his instruction, but in the particular kind of snake that he sent. Therefore, I understand from this that the kind of thing I have to make in order to protect them also has to be related to nachash. What's related to nachash? Nechoshes copper. There's only one issue with that. Only one issue. And that is, if you're going to say that the Torah in Pasuk Ches doesn't spell out the whole conversation between Hashem and Moshe, just the salient points, so how do we know? Maybe Hashem said to Moshe, Asei lecha nachash saraf nechoshes. Maybe he told him straight that it should be copper. If Rashi's thinking is that not every bit of the instruction was recorded in Pasuk Ches, but it only came out in Pasuk Tes with Moshe's application, so then, theoretically, it could be that the reason he made it out of copper is because Hashem said so. Why is Rashi so convinced that Moshe was not told to make it out of copper, and he had to derive that out of word association? Why is that so clear to him? It's clear to him that Hashem said nachash, even though the Torah doesn't say that. That's clear to Rashi. And it's equally clear to Rashi that Hashem did not say nechoshes. Why? Why not? Surely it's possible that Hashem could have spelled out the whole thing. So to understand that, what we've got to do is, we've got to go to the previous Pasuk Ches, and have a look at what Rashi said. Because our question was, why did Rashi talk about the whole business of how it is that looking at the snake would help? Why does he say that first, before he tells us what the material of the snake is? So let's have a look at that, and I'm going to run through the first part of the Rashi because it's not what we need to focus on. We're going to focus on the second. The Rashi on Pasuk Ches is Kol HaNashuch, all who are bitten. So firstly, Rashi says, Kol HaNashuch comes to tell us that even if you were bitten by some other kind of an animal, this copper snake would heal. So that's not the part we're going to focus on. Let's read it quickly. Kol HaNashuch afilu kelev v'chamor noshchoi hayinizik If a person during this particular plague was bitten by a dog or by a donkey, they would have this incredibly bad reaction to it. It's just that the poison of the snake would be the fastest way to kill people. So therefore Rashi points out that if any other animal bit a person, he simply had to look briefly at the copper snake and he'd be healed. But if he was attacked by one of the snakes, he'd actually have to gaze with focus at the snake in order to be okay. Okay, so now comes the part we're going to focus on. Now, what does Rashi say? And it happened that if somebody was bitten by the snake, then they would look at the snake and be healed. Hang on a second. Where are those words from? Is from Pasuk Tes. Hey, that's from Pasuk Tes. Why is Rashi explaining it now? He should have waited until we got to Pasuk Tes and then explained this. So now we understand even better what our original question was. Why is it that Rashi is commenting on this before he talks about the material? Because now we see that Rashi is actually quoting the words of our Pasuk and Dafka explaining them before our Pasuk. Why? Says Rashi, because the message over here is vehibit. Vehibit means you look, you stare, you gaze. In other words, you are focused. How would a person be healed from the snake bite? Only if they would focus on the copper snake. They had to look with intention. This is not just a matter of eyes. It's not just a matter of looking with your eyes. There has to be intention. There has to be a dedication to a process. What does that mean? So our sages taught, is it possible that a snake, this copper snake, would have the power to decide who dies and who lives? Or is it possible that the physical snake can kill and the copper snake can save? Ella, rather, the point over here is that when the people would raise their eyes upwards, because the snake was on a pole, so it forced you to look upwards. So as soon as the people raised their eyes upwards, what would happen? That would cause them to dedicate their heart, to subject their heart to Hashem. In simple words, we would call this teshuvah. That's what it is. This would be a reminder to do teshuvah. Then hayu misrapim. Then they would be healed. In other words, it's not the snake that would heal them. It's their shift of perspective and their shift of values to say, I'm dedicating myself to Hashem. This is a reminder to look upwards. So I'm going to su'um arim einechem, I'm going to raise my eyes to Hashem, and I'm going to be dedicated. That's what saved them. Ve'im lav hayu nimoikim, or another opinion, nizoikim. If they were unwilling to subject themselves to Hashem, then they would be harmed by the snake, or they would depreciate because of the poison of the snake. So what does Rashi want us to know even before we get to the material that the snake was made out of? He wants us to know that this is a process by which Moshe would encourage people in a life-threatening situation to recognize that the snake can't kill them. And the only reason that they have succumbed, number one, to this attack, and number two, to being bitten, is because they had disconnected themselves from Hashem. Hashem is life. So what was the purpose of the snake? To get them to look upwards again and to remind themselves that you've got to be connected to Hashem and dedicated to Hashem in order to be protected. So the motivation of the concept of the snake was to arouse the people to teshuvah. Once you know that, then you can come along and explain this concept of lashon noifel al lashon. The person looks up, not only do you see a snake, but you see that the snake is made out of copper. Why out of copper? To remind you that it's nachash. To remind you of the snake in an even more profound way. To remind you what happened. Why did you get bitten by the snake? Rashi said earlier why you got bitten by the snake. Right? I think it's in Pasuk Vav. Let's just go back a second. Pasuk, I think it's in Pasuk Vav. And the second Rashi on Pasuk Vav. That the snakes bit the people, says Rashi, why did they get bitten? Let the Nachash, who was punished for saying negative things, all the way back in Gan Eden, where he said bad things. Diba is not even Lashon Hara. We already learned this, by the way, if you remember, in the Rashi that we did on Parsha Shlach. So Diba, we said, is any Hoitzas Dvarim. It's any kind of verbalization. So what happened back in Gan Eden? The snake said things that he shouldn't have said. What do you think? It's going to be such a big deal to eat from the tree of knowledge. So Nachash, the Nechoshes is supposed to remind us that people who've spoken out of turn are getting punished. So why does Rashi first explain the mechanics of how the snake saves you? Because he wants to emphasize that the snake was supposed to evoke a sense of we are in a bad place and therefore we have to do teshuvah. So not only does the figure of the snake represent that, but the material emphasizes it again. Look what happened. Hashem told Moshe that you have to make a snake that is made out of copper material, which itself carries the theme of snake. Nechoshes, it's got the same root. So that will kind of emphasize for you, you have become snake-like. You have adopted snake-like behavior, and therefore you have to do teshuvah. So we've now understood why it is that Rashi has to explain to us specifically that it's made out of nechoshes, lashon noifel al lashon, and also why it's not something that Hashem had said. Hashem said, do teshuvah. And Moshe derives from that we need to come up with a system that will awaken them to do teshuvah in the most profound, or so to speak, most in-your-face way. That's the goal. And that teaches us, by the way, an interesting lesson. It teaches us that in Torah, words are powerful. So a word like nechoshes, which is copper, we suddenly realize it's not just copper. It's a word that is associated with nachash, is associated with the snake. It's like the Gemara tells us, shma kol gorim, that there's a principle that sometimes you look at the name of something and it actually has an impact on what that particular thing is. And perhaps when we learn the whole Torah now, we've got to apply this principle, that don't just read words as words, but always read into the words. What do they associate with? What do they teach us? There'll be other lessons, perhaps even lessons that can be life-saving lessons, like this one. That's all just a little bit esoteric or abstract. Copper, nachash, okay, very nice. So the letters are the same. Let's try and understand this a little bit deeper. So now, what does the Torah say? The Torah says very clearly that a person who was bitten by that snake was going to die. There was no serum, there was no escape. Anybody who was bitten by the snake died. Now, what are we going to see? Hashem tells Moshe, if you come up with a particular method that I'll instruct you, which is a nachash hanachoshes, a copper snake, that will stop them dying. So we have to ask ourselves an interesting question. You're telling me basically that I need a supernatural method to stop the people dying. That means by the laws of nature, these people are dead. It's just a matter of time. In other words, according to the laws of nature, there's nothing that you could do to prevent them dying. The poison is in their system. It is a fatal poison. They're going to die. That's it. Nothing you could do. So we have to then ask ourselves this question. If something is already, or someone is already in a place that they are, according to the laws of nature, dead, how do you stop them from dying? Let's understand this a little bit better. Nachash, the snake, is the one who introduced death into the world originally. Because when Hashem put Adam and Chava into Gan Eden, they were originally going to live forever. It's because of the snake that came along and introduced temptation and allowed them or encouraged them to eat from the tree of knowledge. That's why they died. So not only is this a case of people who have been bitten by snakes and therefore they're going to die, Nachash is the icon of death. The Gemara even tells us that there were 4 people in history who were so spiritual and so perfect that they did not deserve to die. Why did they die? Be'et Yoshel Nachash, because of the history of the snake who brought death into the world, and now it is inescapable. So the snake represents death. Somebody who's bitten by the snake, that means that the person he's got this kind of death flowing through his veins. So he's as good as dead. It's like halakhically when a person, for example, is a treifa, a person who has a disease or an injury that they will not be able to recover from. So halachically, if somebody murders them, it's not the same as if you murdered a healthy person because they're already considered dead. It's a fascinating area in halacha. It's not a halacha shir, but just to understand the principle. Likewise, if somebody's condemned to death by a Jewish court, they are already considered dead even before the execution happens. So these people were condemned to death by Hashem. How do you bring these people back to life? In other words, what is the method that this snake on a pole is supposed to represent? Logic will tell you that if you have 2 things that are contradictory, obviously the one cannot help the other. In other words, life and death are contradictory. So whatever spiritual realm life comes from is not strong enough to stop death, obviously, because then nobody would die. So Mekoyer Chaim, the root, so to speak, of death, is not powerful enough. Sorry, the root of life is not powerful enough to stop death. So if somebody is already condemned to death, like these people were, the poison is already in their system. You can't now give them more life. It's not going to help. You have to give them what is called Tchias HaMesim. You have to give them the ability to come back from the brink. And in order to do that, you need to touch something which is higher than both death and life. In other words, as the expression goes, Tchias HaMesim is absolutely in the hands of Ein Sof. When Hashem expresses himself as infinite, infinite means he is not bound by any rules. He's not bound by the rules of life, nor is he bound by the rules of death. That means to say that Hashem is beyond any restriction, any limitation, anything that might in any way hold somebody back. Hashem doesn't have any of these problems. So, therefore, the concept of this snake on a pole means that the people directed their eyes upwards, not just upwards to say, I'm going to do teshuvah, and I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have misbehaved, and I'm going to be better. It actually means that they're going to direct their eyes upwards to recognize that Hashem is beyond the rules. Even the rules that Hashem himself made within nature, like the rule that a person who's bitten by a venomous snake cannot survive. That's what they had to look up and see. So now, what represents that? Nechoshes. Why nechoshes? So in Kabbalah and in Chassidus, we're told that the 3 major metals, gold, silver, and copper, all represent different experiences of how manifested you are in the physical world and how much you have the opportunity to turn around and become something holy. Gold and silver are within the physical world, obviously, because they're metals. However, they are very easily transformed into something of holiness, and that's why you'll see that the vast majority of things in the Beis HaMikdash or even in the Mishkan were gold and silver, because they're easily transformed into something of holiness. And that's why we have a whole lot of positive associations with the 2. Gold and silver especially represent 2 types of love towards Hashem. A very intense love, as in gold, and a kind of yearning love, as in silver. Copper, nechoshes, is the metal that is always considered to be impure. Not impure that if you use it in the Beis HaMikdash it is impure, but rather to say copper is associated with klippa. It's a metal that is considered to be very much in the realm of that which is antithetical to holiness. In other words, it's unusual for copper to be transformed and elevated to become holy. That's why it's considered almost like a pachin ponim, like a little bit of a slap in the face if you use something copper for Hashem. For Hashem you give gold, for Hashem you give silver. Copper, that's for your own personal use at home, with minor exception, the copper that was used on the Mizbeach. So copper generally is something that is not easy to transform into holiness. You want to transform copper, it's like trying to transform the snake itself. Makes no sense. Doesn't work. In the hierarchy of holiness, this is stuck and trapped in the impure and the unholy, and it can't be turned. The only way to turn it is if you bring in Ein Sof, if you bring in Hashem himself at his, so to speak, unlimited, unmitigated greatness. Hashem himself can do anything. He can turn the snake into healing. He can turn the copper into the source of that healing. That's what Rashi is telling us. Moshe saw over here that there's a nachash. He saw over here that the source of all death is what's at play. This is what's infected the people. There's no escape. This is how Hashem designed death in the world. And now Hashem tells me that I should make a nachash on a pole in order to fight and turn that around. It must be that just like the snake itself is going to be, so to speak, supernatural. It's going to turn from being this venomous snake to somehow being neutralized. So the correct thing to represent that is the metal that is similar. The metal which represents impurity and needs to be turned around only by Hashem himself. Which helps us to understand why the word nechoshes is actually not used in the Torah, even though Hashem said it. That's what Rashi says. So the word nachash. The word nachash, Rashi says, was said by Hashem to Moshe and not recorded in the Torah, and Moshe is the one who has to bring it to the fore. Why? Quite famously, we're told that there's an interesting debate between various spiritual components as to what do you do with a sinner. Sha'alu leTorah. They asked Torah, what do you do with a sinner? At first it starts Sha'alu leChochma. They asked wisdom, what do you do with a sinner? And the wisdom said, the sinner should die. That's it. There's nothing you can do. There's no recourse. Sha'alu leTorah. They asked Torah, what should you do with a sinner? So the Torah said, Yavi asham v'skaper. He should bring an asham sacrifice and he'll be forgiven through the sacrifice. In other words, what does the Torah say? You can't turn negative into positive. If somebody has sinned, all they could do is they could do teshuvah, and once they've done teshuvah, what they did wrong is now no longer held as malicious. It's considered as if it was a mistake, and for that you can bring an asham to neutralize your mistake. But you can't actually get rid of the negative that you've done. Shalu la Hashem, they asked Hashem, what should you do? Nefesh achaitas, what should you do with the soul of the sinner? Says Hashem, Yaseh tshuva v'yichaper. He should do teshuvah, and teshuvah will cleanse. In other words, in the wording of the Torah, there's no nachash. In the wording of the Torah, the best that we can do is we can reduce a person's sin from having been on purpose to being a mistake. But we can't turn the sin itself into something positive. So the Torah can't tell us the word nachash. Moshe, who is Hashem's spokesperson, says, let me tell you what Hashem himself says. Hashem himself says, we'll make a nachash out of nechoshes because it is possible to turn the negative around, to do such a degree of teshuvah that not only are you excused and no longer deserve punishment, but such a degree of teshuvah that the nachash itself becomes part of the healing. What we call zedonos nasaloi kazochios, where a person is propelled by the anxiety and the urge to get away from their bad behavior. So therefore they are so enthusiastic in their movement forward, and they are so much more dedicated in what they do because of what was wrong. Therefore the nachash itself becomes part of the process of healing. That Moshe teaches us directly from Hashem. But Torah, at Torah level can't give you access to that. You have to plug in directly to Hashem himself. So obviously there's a wonderful lesson for us over here. And the lesson for us over here is when it comes to doing teshuvah, the approach and the attitude that we have to take to teshuvah is, I want to connect to Hashem himself. I'm not trying to excuse myself from a punishment that is mandated by the Torah. I want to connect to Hashem Himself, and therefore I'm going to do everything in my power to connect to Hashem Himself. That gives us the opportunity to turn the nachash of poison into the source of healing, which in Mitzvah Hashem we should all succeed in doing in our lives.